All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Inside Theater. How's everybody doing? Okay, you can do better than that. Come on. How's everybody doing? All right. Come on. We all need some love. We all need love. All right. So we are now going to have a great discussion about the fantastic art of editorial. And I'm sure it's changing a lot. And we're going to hear from exciting professionals through the case study of talking about Only Murders in the Building. How many of you watched that show? All right, so let us bring up the fabulous Shelly Westerman and Bobbie Osteen, and they're going to get into it. Let's have a big hand. A New York big hand.
Is this working? Yes.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you all for being here. I'm so excited to be welcoming the wonderful person and editor, Shelly Westerman.
Oh, thank you, Bobbie.
So we're meeting for the first time in person, but we've talked for many hours. And you have quite a reputation. And the reputation is that every time I say Shelly's name to anyone, they say, "Oh my God, I love Shelly so much." So she has this hugely popular reputation. The other thing there's many remarkable things about you, but one of the most remarkable stories is that you went from working 11 years at the Federal Reserve Bank, and in that same year that she decided to leave, she was an assistant editor on Velvet Goldmine, and You've Got Mail. So that's quite a transition.
Yes.
Do you want to explain how that happened?
To make a long story somewhat short, I was living in Atlanta, working nights as a computer operator at the Federal Reserve Bank, going to Georgia State. The Fed was paying for my education, so I was studying business, and I got to the Finance 101 class and had a breakdown. I'm like, I can't do this. So I switched the major to film, at which point I had to pay for my own education. But during that time in Atlanta, I volunteered at film festivals. I became a volunteer at Image, Film, and Video, like a nonprofit media arts center, which I then eventually became a board member. And so I always knew I had to get to New York or LA if I was serious about working in film. So the Federal Reserve had a job opening in New York. So I transferred. They paid for me to move. And I worked at the New York Fed downtown there, for about 2 years, during which time I kind of did the same thing. I volunteered, around town, for film festivals. I volunteered at, what's now called Film Independent, to get to know, the networking, get to know the community, get to know what was out there. And at that point, someone at a film festival said, "Hey, you should apply for an internship at a place called Spin Cycle Post." So I went there and did it and took a leave of absence from the Fed, at which point, for whatever bureaucratic reasons, I was getting paid my full salary. But I would go to Spin Cycle every day and stock the soda machines and clean out the bathrooms and answer the phones. And then people started teaching me film skills. I thought I was going to be learning Avid skills, but instead it was 35 millimeter. At that point, people were editing on the Avid and cutting and splicing, conforming 35 millimeter work print to screen their cuts. So I was learning all of that. There was a big kind of group of us that were all still together to this day. Some of you might know, like Brian Cates taught me how to use a synchronizer, and Justine Halliday taught me how to make leaders. And so there was this big group of us all kind of working in independent film at that time. And at that point, someone offered me a job as the film assistant on Velvet Goldmine. It was a $300 a week non-union job. And so I had to go turn in my notice at the Fed. At that point, they had kind of caught up to me and said, "You got to come back." And I said, "Well, no, I'm not coming back. I have this super cool movie." So Velvet Goldmine was my first film, as a film assistant. The place I was working at was called Good Edit. It was kind of downtown Manhattan on Canal Street. There were other independent films being made there too. Everybody kind of helped each other. I didn't know exactly what I was doing. When I interviewed for the job, I thought with Myron Kirstein, who's now a big editor, I thought he would kind of be guiding me, and he kind of said, okay, here's your film room. I'm like, wait, what do you mean it's my film room? Like what? So I had Norm Holland's handbook for assistant editors, and I would work 100 hours a week, for my $300. And I would just learn, and other people working on other films across the hall, would come over and help. Everyone was kind of pitching in, helping everyone else.
And I think what's so interesting when you're talking about conforming film is it was an opportunity for you because you're taking basically looking at all the edits on the Avid that were made by the editor, and now you have to conform them. So you have to study what they're doing, or you would study and say, oh, how interesting. They made that choice and they made that choice. And there were so many edits that you really had to conform. So what a great way to learn the creative art of editing, doing a pretty tedious task, right?
Absolutely. At that point, like each reel of film would be 20 minutes of the movie. So you would have to generate reports on the Avid and kind of track what the changes were and organize all your film to cut and splice that together. And how you felt about each reel would be dependent on how many changes. You might get a reel that has 150 changes. You're like, okay, I can do this. You might get a report that says 325 changes. You're like, oh, crap. How am I going to do that? But you saw every single edit. You would have to unsplice and splice and pull film and cut. And you really just got this study, like minuscule, like seeing exactly what the editor was doing.
And the other thing that will play out when you start getting into the boot camp of editing TV series and the pressures and the organizational skills you have to have, that Shelly, you did say that at your job at Federal Reserve, you had a great ability to oversee things and see the big picture and systems and even computers. So it's like everything led to your these breadcrumbs that could come along, and then you have this career and you can show your full abilities. Like the next thing I wanted to mention was you say your two of your great mentors were Richard Marks, who was the editor on You've Got Mail, and then later Julia and Julia, you were the first assistant for him, and you said he and Nora Ephron were very much mentors and sort of role models to you. Can you explain why each of them were role models?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Richie, we called him Richie. He taught us all how a movie is made. When you're on a feature at that point as an assistant, you're on from day one until the day it's in the theater. So you get to see the whole thing play out. So Richie was the captain. He was the picture editor on a feature film, kind of steers the whole ship. So I really got to learn how he interacted with all of the departments, how he took control of everything that was going on in a very respectful way. He was very, always mindful of the crew, making sure people are getting paid, making sure their work is done correctly, making sure they're okay and fed. He would kind of have an eye on all of that. So I really got to see how a film is put together from the beginning to the very end, which is, that was invaluable while getting paid to be an assistant editor.
And I love when he said the job is 40% editing and 60% interpersonal relationships, which is really a wise statement. And you were telling me also, like when you, even on this show, Only Murders on the Building, that you really advocate for yourself to be involved in a lot of aspects of production that maybe editors wouldn't normally be a part of. Because you are invested and you have the knowledge and awareness, and that came from Richie too, partly.
Definitely, yeah. Because the TV model is very different. You're on a much tighter schedule. You've got an episode assignment. When your work is done and you've edited the picture, then there's a whole post team that kind of takes over, where I wasn't used to that. So it was like, no, you're not taking my picture from me. So I kind of inserted myself into kind of the post processes that the team takes care of. And it has been helpful because we know so much of the intricacies of it, and we've been on it from the beginning and know the likes and dislikes. So it's been beneficial, but not typical for television.
I always say the editors are the guardians of the story throughout. So this is an example.
Yeah.
So besides the amazing lunches that Nora insisted you have every day, including one that you had never tasted before and a dessert. It's my favorite thing.
Yeah.
But what else would you say Nora Ephron was, helped you or inspired you as a role model?
I think, she was always very present and always very mindful of all the, I don't want to say employees, all her co-collaborators and all the sound department, music department. She was always listening to you. She saw you. She was paying attention to you. She respected you. She talked to you. She asked you for your opinions. So we were never treated like an other. We were always treated as part of the team.
Yeah, and Shelly, I mean, you've been an incredible mentor yourself. I mean, I have to, there's a Shelly quote that I have to say because I love it so much. You know, we'll talk about this more later, but Shelly really advocated for her assistant to be her co-editor. And, she said to me, I'm comfortable. I have credits. It doesn't mean anything unless I can share this experience with others. It's a beautiful statement, and you know, your money is where your mouth is. I just think it's really great that, people inspire you to be good mentors, and then you're a wonderful person anyway, but it's very important to mentor others. So I really appreciate that about you. So the other mentor you mentioned is, James Brooks. So you worked on this film, How Do You Know, as an additional editor. Can you say what you learned from him? Because
One of his films that not a lot of people have seen.
Right. That's a great cast, though.
We shot for almost 5-6 months on location, and then we were in post for a year. I would say the biggest thing I undeniably got from Jim was how to look for performance. As an assistant / additional editor on that, there would be 25, 27 takes, and you would go watch dailies with him every single day in his trailer at lunch, and he might say, where's that take where she turns her head and a tear starts to fall out? You had to know quickly, that was take 17. And so like you had to watch dailies, you had to kind of learn what he was going for, you had to look at performance like so carefully that I think that was just, I got so much out of that experience. I think to this day I'm a much better editor for having had all that time to learn. And there would be times he would shoot a big scene on location and extras and all the actors, and then he would say, I don't have it. We have to reshoot it. And everybody would be up in arms, and you'd look at it and go, he's kind of right.
And he had the luxury to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But you also talked about, because this comes up in Only Murders in the Building too, this finding the balance between emotion and comedy, and really reaching for the emotion. And comedy's great, but to prioritize that. And you said that he inspired you in that way as well.
Yeah, most definitely. And for what's real, like John Hoffman, our showrunner on Only Murders, is mainly interested in like grounding everything in reality. There's sometimes Steve Martin gets silly and it's goofy, and same with Marty, but he always likes to have a grounding in reality. And I think undoubtedly working with Jim Brooks, had a huge influence on that.
So then you get into Ryan Murphy world, which, as I said before, boot camp kind of, and the intensity of the schedules and the amount of work and the amount of dailies and all that, and being able to see the big picture and sort of apportion your time in certain ways. So Shelly did actually 7 shows in 5 years. And the last one, of course, you got an Emmy nomination for American Crime Story, The Assassination of Gianni Versace. So now we're at, Only Murders in the Building, John Hoffman, who Shelly told me repeatedly is a truly wonderful human. But there was some crossover because you were recommended indirectly by someone from the Ryan Murphy world, and some people came over with you from the Ryan Murphy world. You said you were terrified. Can you talk about that?
I mean, who wouldn't be terrified to edit Steve Martin and Martin Short and then wait for their notes on what you've done? It's like, oh my God. Yes, it was very terrifying. And they were so kind and generous. Not a whole lot of notes. Marty would have like a list of notes, and then he would say, okay, no, never mind. I watched it again. I only have these 3 notes. And then we'd give him a day and he'd be like, okay, I watched it again. I don't have any notes.
And you said he had a incredible memory for very specific.
He can remember all this. I know in one of those takes I did this, or look like in take 4, I know I did this. And so he would have that. Steve would wait to watch with his wife and they would watch together, and he would only have a few notes, which that surprised me. And they were always really good. We'll talk about one when you see a clip, but there weren't anything like devastating.
But the other thing, which actually doesn't surprise me, is that he's very serious and very hard on himself and a perfectionist. And even when the director would say, you're fine, he would be, no, I've got to do it again. And
yeah, that was kind of shocking. I expected dailies to be full of ad libs and goofy, and like Steve was very serious, very, he would get hard on himself if he messed up a take or messed up a word, and Marty would just get him to laugh, and Marty would say, oh, Steve, just do some of that improv, of which you have no ability.
That's so great.
Yeah.
I mean, the surprising thing is there's no improv on that show. They work things through in the table reads and, before shooting, and not very many takes. So that's interesting too. Yeah. So you also said, and this is, I was telling Shelly earlier, I'm starting to discover this a lot when I start asking this question of all this super talented, accomplished editors, is they always say when they watch dailies, they study them in a way. They look at everything repeatedly. And Shelly's under a television schedule pressure, and she has a lot of dailies, but you said you watch before they say action, after they say cut, like how the director is working with the actors, just studying it, because the truth is one of the most beautiful things is the golden nuggets you find sometimes accidentally in editing, and just like you said, respecting the directors and the actors' intentions, you have to really honor that, right?
Absolutely. Like, I think that came from my film background a lot, where I would just carve out the time. I would figure out how to be faster later so that I had enough time to watch everything from the very first frame that's available to me to the very last frame. And then I take notes. I take paper notes pretty meticulously on the dailies, and I'll watch everything, and then I'll go back and kind of start to watch again as I assemble a cut. So I'm watching kind of twice. And that's, I don't bargain on that. That's set in stone. I'm not giving that up. Even if things get crazy and I'm like, I need another day or two. Sorry, but not sorry.
Yeah. And what's also a beautiful source of information for you is to watch the table reads, which the editors get to watch on Zoom. So of course you see, tell about what you look for and what you discover from watching that.
The table reads are great. Especially because they shoot here in New York and we're all over, mostly in Los Angeles. So they'll all be on the Zoom, which is kind of cool because you're in your house watching Meryl Streep on Zoom in your bedroom. You start to hear the rhythms of the show, and I start to hear sounds. I start to hear music. I start to kind of get an idea for what I think the script is going to be. By that point, I've read the script. And I've been to like a concept meeting where they have a general high level kind of talk about the episode. And then sometimes you've already had a tone meeting where they get very granular. But then the table read is kind of the last thing we'll do before we shoot the episode. So you really get an idea. You hear rhythms, you hear jokes, you hear what isn't working, what's really working. You know, they'll go back and retool some stuff after that. Marty and Steve will have specific like writing notes, and they'll go back, and then you'll get the final draft before they start shooting.
So there's, because people are so interested in Meryl Streep, in general. I mean, you did say that was pretty intimidating too, and you were in awe, but you had worked on Julie and Julia, so
Yeah.
you were familiar. But, so Steve Martin tells a story where he said, so they start the table read first time with Meryl Streep, and she says, I just want to say how happy I am that we are all here together, working so hard together. And the showrunner, John Hoffman, says, oh, yeah, I agree. And Steve and Marty say, John, that's her first line. She just went right into the zone. She didn't say hello. She just started doing it. And you said that's how she was. She was, except in ADR, but on the set,
Yeah.
she was
right. The first table read with her, all the other actors' jaws dropped the second she started reading her lines. I don't know how to describe it other than it's just otherworldly, and unless you experience it. But it happened a number of times. There was a scene, and she's on the stage, and she tells the orchestra, oh, stop, I can't hear the rhythm. And I'm like, oh, shit, what happened to the orchestra? You know, they didn't do something right. And then it was her line. She was acting. It happened, I'd say at least 10 or 12 times during the season.
And she actually called she called Marty repeatedly and said, I want to be on the show. And then she kept asking John Hoffman, am I the murderer? And he wouldn't tell her for the longest time.
Yeah.
We were wondering too, of course. So just to give you a sense of the overall challenges and what's involved in being an editor on this show. So basically, you know, it's a 6 to 7 day shoot. You have 1 to 2 days to put it in a cut. Then you work with the director 1 or 2 days. And then you start working with John Hoffman. First he runs it on QuickTime, and then you do basically, I mean, it's like Evercast.
Right.
You work with him. But yeah, so, that's a lot. And like I said, that's why it's particularly impressive that Shelly really minds the dailies and the other thing that's interesting is, so you did 2, 5, 8, and so both season 2 and season 3, she did episodes 2, 5, 8, and 10. So she had 4 episodes, and the directors would shoot 2 episodes at a time. So you would think that would give her a little wiggle, break, because of course the next episode or the episode previous, she didn't have to edit, but you said you're really juggling 4 shows at once, because can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, you think there's a little break, but that's not really how it works. You might not even have all of your stuff. There might still be a scene or 2 missing. There might be a big visual effects scene you're still working on. Like, anything happens. The first episode, you're okay, but by your second episode, you're going to get backlogged. And then at some point, you are definitely juggling all 4, especially with a show that's like a mystery, because there's so much that ties back to other episodes. So it's not like we can lock down all the previous episodes and keep moving forward. Our showrunner is constantly like, oh, we have to go back and remember to cut this in to refer to this for this episode. And so we kind of don't lock everything till very close to the end. So you're in a constant state of juggling.
And this whole thing of teamwork and collaboration is so essential on this show, because you have to constantly check with the other editors, like you're a little confused about something and they'll say, oh no, because that's set up before for that. And it's so complicated because you have the mystery and the misdirects.
Yeah.
And you have all the individual personal stories, and then you have these golden comedy moments, and you have to sort of say, is it worth it to play comedy? Is that a real challenge?
It is. And we were lucky because the editors, we had previous relationships. 2 of us did on season 2. And then on season 3, we'd all 3 had worked together before. So that gives you kind of a nice shorthand. And our assistants all know each other. So they're kind of our great trackers in terms of, technical details or story details. They're always tracking that stuff and talking to each other about that. But you have to be collaborative, and we show each other our episodes. We talk about them together. Yeah, you have to be. The same thing with our sound and our music department that we involve early on. They'll start developing some sounds for the theater in season 3, and then we have to make sure those are propagated to all the other episodes as well.
And we're going to start running clips, but I just want to touch on the music part because I thought it was really interesting. You're particularly involved in the music, and you have this wonderful composer who's very collaborative, and you asked for that to be stemmed out.
Yeah.
So you have the instrumentation separated out so you can FaceTime with him and he plays things for you and you give him ideas and it's beautiful.
He likes to FaceTime a lot and and he likes to play instruments, and he'll hop to his keyboards and he'll hop over to his guitar and I'll say, Sid, I don't like that instrument. Play something else. He's like, should I try a French horn? I'm like, I don't know. What does it sound like? And so he'll sing and play things and hum melodies on the FaceTime and we'll play it against picture and then he'll give me a version and then I'll send it back and say, well, I don't like this or that, or this is too fast, or I need a deeper tempo, or, and I don't know all the musical terms, so I just say whatever and he figures it out, but it's super fun.
So this is another thing you told me. This speaks to the theme of Shelly as a wonderful person, but it's such a great little tidbit for anybody who's in the working world, really. You say that, normally you come onto a show and there are all these departments and then problems come up and then you call a department and say, hey, I'm sorry, but this blowout. But Shelly, instead, she goes to all the departments and compliments them before any problems have started. So just to be nice, just to be collaborative and say, hey, I love your costumes, or that was a great shot, or reaching out and taking the initiative to be a team and be positive. And I think that's so great. It's like you never think about, because, you just go to work and then you try to be nice when there are problems. But if you've established this whole thing before, it makes it so much nicer.
It's so much nicer, and they're surprised to get the call, and it's like, wonderful to develop that relationship, and I want them to feel assured that I'm also looking out for them. Like there's oftentimes they want a scene all in close-ups. I'm like, well, she's got this fabulous designer sequin dress on, so I need to see her in a wide shot. Sorry, I'm not going to give you everything in a close shot. Or, a shot of the theater stage. Like I know that the production designer went to great lengths to make this lighthouse tower. So I'm going to make sure that I have a shot in there where the light's circling and you can see the whole stage. Like I'm going to make sure that everyone who works so hard, those hundreds of people that I don't really know, like that their work is seen.
That's really great. Yeah, no, it's really great. I so appreciate that about you. Yeah. So we're going to start talking about specifics, clips. So what's really fun is we're actually going to show 2 clips, and they're both the finales of season 2 and season 3. Which, you got an Eddie nomination for, I'm sure you're going to get one again, but, for season 2. So one of the things I love about this show is that every season John Hoffman does something different. And clearly the killer reveal party, there's a lot, it's very dense with plot and character, and then the following season is more, it's about moms, it's very emotional, there's theater and some musical. So your challenges keep changing, but it's also great for an audience to have. So both episodes were directed by Jamie Babbitt, who's wonderful, right? And, but you had 53 hours of dailies.
Jamie shoots like a film director. So normally we would have 20-ish hours per episode, but on both finales, I had over 50 hours for a 30-minute show.
So I think we should just run the clip, right? And then talk about it.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
is literally no motive here. Why would I have done any of this?
Excellent question. Cindy?
Why are you moving in slow motion?
Going?
Stop it! Stop it! I'm leaving!
All right, stop.
Oh God, what is that?
So you sign a big, juicy $30 million podcast deal. Problem is, you don't have a juicy story to podcast. So you go looking to invent one by a lonely old woman who gets murdered in a big, fancy apartment building. Honestly, not that great. Unless the three people who did the murdering are three A-list celebrities.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were being funny.
Are we getting under your skin, Ms. Canny? Admit you did it. Admit it!
Admit it! Forget it! And I'm not confessing anything because
Because why?
Because she didn't do it.
Mabel, we're so close. What are you doing?
Solving a murder. She did it.
Excuse me, what?
This is the work of an artist who just came into the picture recently. Your gallery needed new energy. Wasn't that what you said? Turns out you were making art from my tragedy. So why not frame me and up the value of your art?
Is this all part of the plan?
I'm really not sure anymore.
I am outraged, and frankly, haven't we been down this road before?
Sorry, who is this person? And can we get her to dial the accent down a little bit? I mean, if I can't understand a word, how's Middle America gonna get it?
You're a real charmer, Alice. And a hell of a kisser.
Nice.
But you're also a liar. And a killer.
Oh. Bravo, Mabel. Bravo indeed. Here all this time I was thinking you were just a bore with the drawing skills of a toddler.
It was you at the pickle diner, begging Bunny for her Rose Cooper painting, but she wanted $14 million for it. 14 for Savage. That was a little out of your price range, wasn't it?
You talentless, smug bitch.
Holy shit, she did it. She got her.
No!
The stabbing. Yes, with the Arconia? Yes, he's bleeding.
Charles! Oh, my God.
You're okay, buddy. You're okay.
Jesus Christ. Please tell me you got all that.
So you can imagine how overwhelming that was to put together with all those characters and all. There was the fake out because, of course, Steve Martin and Marty Short, they knew that the Alice thing was fake, but when you cut to them, you can't give it away. And Tina Fey, by the way, was only there for a half a day and it was a 4-day shoot. So you had to do some trickery to.
Yeah, cutting around her stand-in. So anytime we're like over the other characters, it was Tina's stand-in, which we were like, her hair's not the same. It doesn't look like Tina. And then some of the continuity was problematic because the actors weren't standing in the exact right position on the subsequent days, but kind of little digital VFX and split screens and things like that.
And you got a note from Steve Martin that he wanted to go wide on the slow motion because he thought it would is better. And
Yeah, we had like a few more close shots because we just loved him in that slow-mo scene. And Steve was like, it's funnier to see the whole body. So we rearranged that a little bit to be a little wider, which was funnier.
And it's interesting when you were talking earlier about performance, because you said you had different choices with Tina Fey. You know, you found sort of a middle ground in terms of.
Yeah, she gave us a range. She would, what you see, and then she kind of went way over the top. And we kind of pared that down to kind of keep her as real as we could. Yeah.
But another thing I thought was really interesting, because, you must have been a bit overwhelmed dealing with all these moving parts, and you said that you watched it silent and that really helps you. Can you explain why it helps you?
Yeah, this is just a small chunk of that whole end.
It's 15 minutes,
party.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's only 3 minutes, yeah.
You're tracking so many people and you've got to hit all the characters and you're trying to track the looks, and it was just way too distracting with sound and music. So Peyton Koch, who was my assistant who became a co-editor on that, we would just watch it MOS or without sound over and over and over again and say, are we telling the story? Are we in the right place? Are we in the right size shot? Do we need to be closer there? And over and over and over and over. And then we would play with music and then have a slightly different response. And then we would tweak from that too. So it was a constant checking to see if we're, if we're catching everybody, and then also kind of making sure the story made sense.
And here's the amazing thing. So John Hoffman ran it and he didn't have any changes.
Yeah.
But I do think that happens a lot when editors do really complex scenes and the director is smart, or showrunner is smart enough to know, this is working. We may not want to unravel this.
Yeah.
Because it's working. Congratulations on pulling that off. I mean, it's really, and the Brazo line, he was gonna.
Yeah. So the one, it was one note that we did get on there when Steve, Charles' character is dying. He did a take where he says his famous line, like, this sends the investigation into a whole new, and then he stops. And I thought it was hilarious, but everyone else wanted to go serious, like Steve was really dying, or Charles was really dying.
Because you are supposed to think that. Spoiler, he doesn't. So let's go into the next season. This is the last episode of season 3. Very different problems. One of the big ones was geography. So let's run the clip and keep in mind the geography and where Mabel's looking, because it's very crucial. And when you get confused, run the clip, please. Thank you.
It's dawn sampling by till safe you return from my love is a lighthouse. So darling, my darling, look for the light.
That was extremely moving. Thank you, Dickie. I need to tell you something. When I was younger, I made a decision. The sort of decision that you can only make when you're too young to make it. And I just spent the rest of my life wondering. I knew it. My God, I knew it. I felt like I was going crazy. I feel like I've known since I saw you at that first read-through. It's like
like you were calling to me, like the lighthouse. Like, I can't explain it any more than I can explain the plot of this musical. But I knew.
You knew? But then you must also know that all these years, even before I met you and got to know you, there's nothing in the world I wouldn't do for you. There's nothing.
Oh, Jonathan, hey, have you seen Cliff?
So first I want to ask you about performance choices with Meryl in that scene. You had the range, and what was your process to discovering?
Yeah. She only did a few takes. They only had very little time to shoot that day. She gave one where she kind of got emotional real quickly, and it kind of tipped it too soon. It didn't feel real enough. So we went back and forth on the one we chose where she says younger. I liked it. She has a little bit of a smile on her face. She's kind of nervous to say it. It's the big moment. It kind of felt more real, but we did go back and forth on just that moment a lot, with her. But in the end, kind of picked her more vulnerable performance, kind of.
Yeah, and I love that you said you held back and playing the music. You played it earlier and it was slightly different. It wasn't as heavy. And, the I Knew It is such a brilliant cut. I have to say that rule of don't cut for a line, cut for a reaction. You have that just enough of her on her when he says I knew it, and then you of course you're dying to see his reaction, but you get the best of both worlds the way you edited it. It was really masterful.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
These little moments, like Meryl takes kind of like half a breath in and there's a little look in her eye, which it's kind of hard to see because it's dark, but I saw it and I loved it and I loved waiting for that. And then the music too, like our inclination was to start the music when Meryl walks over to talk to him, but it didn't. Sid, our composer, was like, no, you're stepping on the action. Like, let the actors do their thing.
Yeah.
So I just scooted his cue down to after I knew it. And then all of a sudden you get the goosebumps and you're like, that's it. You know, it made a huge difference.
Yeah, and that funny line he says when he says, explaining the plot of this musical, which is really tricky for her because she can't really laugh at the line because she's in the middle of this emotional moment, but she's such a brilliant actress that you could afford to.
Definitely. Yeah. It was just the perfect kind of a little bit of a smile, acknowledging it, but still staying emotionally in that moment of revealing.
And the tear came full down on that. So I just want to also just quickly talk about geography. It's always hard when you get confused. It takes you out of the story. And your biggest issue was Cliff and Donna in the audience and where Mabel was looking, and are you clear where she's looking? You want to talk about that?
Right, because we didn't have a shot like over Mabel to the audience to establish that line. So it was more about the shots of Meryl on stage finishing her song. You could see Mabel and Dickie, so you got the geography there at the end of that song, but then her looks were a little bit confusing because how is she looking at them? There's a curtain between them. What is she? So we were all a bit confused, but just through trying to get movements with her head moving, so like she takes you to where you need to be was helpful. Like when Cliff and Donna in the audience, like we show Cliff coming in, so his body movement kind of carries your eye to him so you know that he's sitting next to her. Like all those things were helpful. and then just trying to make sure we had our looks right. I don't think we reversed any of our looks, just trying to get her to look over and back and kind of make that connection. As scripted, there was supposed to be a little flashback of Cliff and Donna kissing, that kind of theme of that mother and son kissing all the, and that just didn't work. It took it out of the story, so we got rid of that. But yeah, it was a little bit of playing around also with the Cliff and Donna, pushing in on the shot a little bit and trying to color time it to give it a little vignette on the side so that your eye went to the middle and went to the mother and son.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
I think we're out of time. Sorry, but thank you so much.
Thank you,
So
Bobbie.
great. Thank you all for being here. Thank you.